Welcome everybody, and I'm going to roll through a couple of slides here and then we'll get right to the presentation just to give you a little bit of the background on what you're going to see today. So when we talk about DTech apps, the first thing I want everyone to understand is that all of our applications are certified applications, meaning they function exactly like a ServiceNow native application. That's important to understand. We kicked off this journey a few years ago with our flagship product, which was Tasker. If anyone on the call is looking for a serious enterprise task management tool where you can have visibility into everything that your team is working on, your office is working on, maybe your division, even across the entire enterprise, Tasker is the only enterprise task management system built on top of the ServiceNow platform with a very easy to use interface. And I always like to say it's built for the 95% of the employee base. Those are the folks that don't live in ServiceNow every day. If you do, you'll still find it very simple, but most people receive an email with a link to a task and they click on it and they're taken into Tasker where they can complete all their work. So we're not going to function or focus, excuse me, on Tasker today, but happy to go over that with you should anyone have a deeper interest. Doc Integrator was the next solution that we built, and we're really going to focus on that today because this is all about keeping your documents, your data in SharePoint, not in ServiceNow. ServiceNow is not a document management solution. And Doc Integrator was built specifically to kind of bridge the gap, the void, which was in ServiceNow, which is could we provide a seamless integration between ServiceNow and SharePoint without documents ever leaving SharePoint? So whatever application you're in, whether it's CSM, the projects, HRSD, could I have teams that collaborate on documents and take advantage of the things that we're going to talk about, the greatness of SharePoint without those documents ever leaving SharePoint? And that's what Doc Integrator is all about. We then added functionality. You might hear us call it the Doc Integrator Suite, but all of this comes as one application, Doc Integrator, and that's Doc Generator and Doc Flow. So if any of you have gone down the path with developers, trying to automate PDFs, for example, and then be able to, set up workflows to route those PDFs for people for approvals or for digital signatures, we built the technology, the wizard behind the scenes that allows you to automate hundreds, if not thousands, of standard PDF and Word documents, and then quickly route those documents to the right people, but having complete visibility into the process. And this is not workflow. So this is designed not to have to go get IT and bring them in. So we talk about ServiceNow and we talk about Microsoft. I think that says it all. Two titans that are not easily connected. We all know and love ServiceNow. If you need to build complex workflow, you're going to go to ServiceNow. If you're looking at Microsoft, most organizations have some pretty good level of Microsoft, mainly desktop applications, including, Teams and Office and PowerPoint, all those great things, but also a heck of a lot of SharePoint. And so the key is, how do we bring these together in a way that makes it very easy to use instead of expensive and time consuming? So let's talk about why we want to keep our files in SharePoint. That's the whole point of this, right? If you're going to collaborate, you've got a team that's working on documents, they're co-authoring, they're co-editing, they're using Microsoft 365. You want to be able to take advantage of all that. And from a scalability and security standpoint, Microsoft and SharePoint really brings all of this to the table. And they've always had very robust search capabilities. But now with the inclusion of a Copilot and the Microsoft AI approach, we're going to show you how in this demo, how you can get to Copilot very easily. Because if you're going to keep everything in SharePoint, which is where it should be, you want to take advantage of the investment that you've already made in AI technologies such as Copilot. What are the challenges? When you're talking about the SharePoint spoke, and I'll say this more than once, if you're using the SharePoint spoke, fantastic. It's more of a administrative tool. Our application, Doc Integrator, can coexist with the SharePoint spoke, and we'll probably show you some of that. But the problem mainly is when you're trying to deploy the SharePoint spoke API set, it's developers, right? We already know they're very expensive. It's a time-consuming process. You know, what happens if the person that kind of led the project 12 months in takes another job, they're now gone. The code that they wrote does everyone have access to it? And so then if you try to outsource to third parties, you know, some of the big consulting firms, it's also very expensive. On the ServiceNow development side, any one of you who have worked with ServiceNow, you know, it can be rigid. There's a lot of duplication, and you don't really have a UI which is designed for non-developers. So we'll get into that, and you'll see that when David Sandberg shows you the application. So why Doc Integrator instead of the spoke? I would probably say why Doc Integrator instead or with the SharePoint spoke. Doc Integrator, what you're going to see today is a lot of a friendly user interface, right? What I just talked about, versus having to go through kind of an extensive manual setup and coding. These are COTS solutions. You are going to deploy them quickly. You're going to configure them, and you're going to be using the application in a matter of days. But with Doc Integrator, you get that advanced functionality. So not only do we connect SharePoint to anything in ServiceNow, any application, by the way, you can deploy it across your ServiceNow ecosystem, but we can also improve the search. I don't know if we'll have time today to talk to you guys and show you how Doc Integrator can facilitate federated search, but that's just another aspect of what we're doing. But that forms approvals and routing, everything comes in one product. And because it's a COTS solution, we're the ones maintaining it. They're certified, as I mentioned earlier. So every time we do an update, we have to go through ServiceNow for the approval. They bless it, and then it's released into your ServiceNow environment to do the upgrade. From a compatibility standpoint, we handle both the cloud and on-premise SharePoint, where SharePoint spoke only works with SharePoint Online. So maybe if you're in the process of thinking about going down the path with the spoke, this may be good timing for you to see the application. And then not to beat a dead horse, but more than just SharePoint integration. So if you are looking to automate forms, we're going to show you that today. If you want to fill in those forms with data from ServiceNow tables, we've built the wizard, the automation behind the scenes to grab that data, automate that, and then using our DocFlow capability, you can route that to the right people for approval and digital signatures if that's what you need. And by the way, if you're using one of those expensive digital signature applications, maybe it's Adobe Pro, maybe it's DocuSign, you can use Doc Integrator with the free Adobe Reader version. So if you're looking to try to cut back on costs, that may be something that we can help you with as well. David, anything else there? Off to the demos.
Thank you, Brian. So in today's demo, we're going to discover how we can easily collaborate and operate in ServiceNow, but use the documents that live in SharePoint. So what we're looking at right now is one user experience on the back end of ServiceNow. We're within CSM Workspace. The thing to note is Doc Integrator, the ServiceNow to SharePoint connection, plugs and plays into any app, so CSM, HRSD, SPM, or custom apps, and Platform Portal and Workspace in terms of the UI. So anywhere and everywhere, we are highly versatile. So for someone that's, let's say, a CSM agent, they would come into this experience, right, see everything that they need to do. This is just out of the box CSM functionality. What we're going to talk about is how Doc Integrator plugs and plays. So this is Doc Integrator, just another tab within the UI. But before we do so, let's talk about why that's important. So keeping documents in SharePoint is crucial when you want to co-edit and have all of the security and version history. If you did want to attach a document via ServiceNow, it would look something like this, where if you did want to edit it, you would bring it down to your desktop, right, download it, make your edits and upload, and then you would have to delete the old one, and it has the same file name. So we have a much simpler and enhanced experience where all these files, even though it looks like they live in ServiceNow, they all reside in SharePoint. Before we actually go into the documents, just some of the data, right? This is the metadata that's coming through SharePoint. There's probably like 100+ columns or fields that are exposed that we can pull in. So any of that data we can bring up. In terms of the document management capability, so the two common use cases we see are co-editing, so that's the Word docs, the Excel and PowerPoint, and additionally, Brian touched upon this a little bit as well, the PDFs and signature capabilities. So first, let's hop into a Word document. So here we make any of our edits. If you know how to use Word documents in SharePoint, it's the same, right, functionality. We're just bridging the two of them together. And some of our customers are either starting to evaluate or deploying Microsoft Copilot. So with one click, we allow you as a customer to leverage, Copilot. This could be for, time savings, making your lives easier, summarizing the document, really understanding quickly what there is, creating a polished, maybe executive summary. So all of the capabilities that Copilot offers, you don't have to switch tabs and bounce back and forth. With one click, use your existing Microsoft and Copilot investment. Hopping back to the CSM's experience, right, we just covered the Word document or co-editing capabilities. The other one is PDFs. So Brian talked about this a bit in the presentation. Some of our customers have expensive, DocuSign where they pay per signature, and they're using it especially for internal purposes, or Adobe Pro paid licenses, or Adobe Sign. We'll see how we can digitally sign this document with free Adobe Reader. Even though it says desktop, you are not bringing it down to your desktop. You're bringing it down via OneDrive, opening it in free Adobe Reader, so it never actually touches your desktop, right? There's no download, upload. From an approval standpoint, we review, everything looks good, and we add our signature. For those on the line that are in the federal space, yes, it does support PIV or CACs for credentialing as well. So now if we hop out of that and open this document, you'll see via the URL, right? It lives in SharePoint. It never leaves SharePoint. And this is the digital signature that was just applied about 30 seconds ago. And why is that important? It's because we are always working on the most up-to-date version. You don't have to have 3 different files that you have to manage, and always you can revert back to a previous version, because again, we are bridging the best of ServiceNow and SharePoint, where in SharePoint you have all of that version history. So before going into a similar or the same idea, but in a different experience, right, where this is workspace, some of you on the call might be familiar with this. Some might be familiar with what we'll talk about next. So now we're going to transition into just another UI. So some of you might be familiar with the one we just looked at. This is platform. So just, another experience that fulfillers or back-end users on ServiceNow are accustomed to. As mentioned before, we plug and play in any app. So we are licensed per user. So if you have 5, 10 apps, we encourage you to put it into embed right into any and all applications. We're going to talk about projects. So this is within SPM. And just like before, just another tab is Doc Integrator. So from the perspective of the project manager or the agent, it is seamless. So they may not even know these documents live in SharePoint because they are accessible via ServiceNow. And when we talk to customers about time to value, I've embedded probably 8 to 10 different applications, SPM, HR, CSM, ITSM, LSD, etc. So I can do it in 1 to 2 hours where I'm not even a developer because it is plug and play when it comes to the actual configuration, right? You pick the sites and libraries and folders you want it, and it seamlessly maps. So if let's say we're in here, we have a document on our local desktop brought in. As seamless as that, we add the document to SharePoint directly, so it bypasses ServiceNow and goes directly to where it will live. In terms of co-editing, right, just like before, one click and you have at your fingertips whatever document you're looking at in SharePoint. If someone is in SharePoint directly and clicks on the same document, you can co-edit together. And as mentioned before, right, we have the ability to leverage Copilot. So if you do have that existing investment, try to leverage that across your business. The other piece that we'll go into is the digital signatures, right? So when you think about those expensive Adobe Pros or DocuSigns of the world, you can accomplish the core functionality, which is digitally signing documents with free Adobe Reader. And we'll talk about this later in the presentation as well when we talk about Doc Integrator Enhanced or Doc Flow. So this first part was all about, again, collaborating and operating on documents, but never leaving the ServiceNow experience, really leveraging the best of your investments. So what we're looking at, again, just like before, is a case or a record on the back end of ServiceNow from a fulfiller's perspective. We're an HR agent. And what we're going to talk about today is Doc Flow, or we'll call it Doc Integrator Enhanced because it is part of that suite. Doc Flow is rapid forms automation, and you can trigger this anywhere and everywhere. So we can do this from the portal. If a change of state, we can trigger that, or what we're going to talk about is as simple as a button, and it does your job for you. So when it comes to these cases, they can come in many different ways, maybe via the virtual agent, right, VA, in-person chat, or phone, email. So however it comes in, as Adam, we know this person wants to work from home, right? They have to apply for telework. And within organizations, a lot of them have very standard processes. So as opposed to finding that document and filling it out, we can just click one button and it triggers that whole process for us. So once we fire this off, David, right, is the one that's going to be requesting the telework application. So we're going to talk about his experience. What we're looking at right now is the single pane of glass as an approver. In terms of how to get here, so 5% of the business is going to be living and breathing in ServiceNow. So you can access us just like any other module or app because we are a certified application built on the platform. But many of your approvers are going to be caring about their day, right, living in email. They're going to receive an email notification with a link, kind of like a ticket, right, with a link that takes you directly into this experience where you can review anything and everything on your plate. So on the left side, this is essentially our to-do list. No matter what form, when it's due, it just pops into our punch list. This is not always clear. So when we talk about forms and documents, it's usually routed around via email. So it's not always clear when it is due per person and per person or group, who is it assigned to. Before proceeding, as you can tell by now, we're heavily embedded and invested in the ServiceNow platform. Same thing goes for Microsoft, so you can even have that Teams integration, so communicate that way. We've heard from customers that you can have a 3-page form with 5 pages of instructions. So as opposed to scrolling up and down or printing out the instructions, we can tailor make this so you only have to look at and do whatever is assigned to you. Before we bring this down to our desktop and follow the very similar process as before, note, even though this document looks like it lives in ServiceNow, it fully resides in SharePoint. So that's why we call Doc Integrator or Doc Flow Doc Integrator Enhanced, because it is always living in SharePoint. We bring this document down to our desktop via OneDrive, right? It is never actually hitting your desktop, no download, upload. And before we actually approve and digitally sign this document, the first thing you probably noticed is all of this information was already pulled and placed into the form that we're looking at. So as long as data exists in ServiceNow in some table, we can take that and auto-populate it into the form, really making, in this case, right, David, the requester's life easier, and he doesn't have to, accidentally type in the wrong, email, add an extra digit on his phone number, and it comes back, and right, there's that whole headache. So now what we're going to do, all the info, all that data looks good from David's perspective. We approve. This document again always lives in SharePoint. And now once we fire this off, it's going to go to the next person or group. So in this case, it is a group. Someone will claim it and proceed within that process. And from us, right, from David's perspective, as opposed to hopping around, to email and looking for documents that live in SharePoint, it's all in your to-do list, everything that you have to do on your plate. We've heard executives blocking off an hour a day to actually digitally sign or approve documents. This is just a much more enhanced way, and they can see everything on their plate. So before concluding this presentation, what we're going to do is hop back into the record that we were looking at the beginning. So this is that HR record. We are Adam, the HR agent, right, that fulfiller from the platform experience. So we also have visibility through this process the entire time. So there's always reports, ServiceNow reporting, and we even have robust management reporting capabilities. But from the HR agent's perspective, they want visibility into everything that's going on relative to this case, right? They are owning it. So we can see where it is in the process. And if we click on this, right, it will open up again, lives and breathes in SharePoint. And this is the digital signature, right, that was just applied about 2 minutes ago, showing that we are always working on the most up-to-date version. And that version history is always stored in SharePoint where you can revert back if needed. So to wrap up, the first part of the demo, we saw the seamless experience for a ServiceNow user, right? We're going about our typical day, in this case as a CSM agent, and without swivel chairing or bouncing around, between different systems, interacting with documents that directly live in SharePoint. And then we took it a step further with DocFlow or Doc Integrator Enhanced and discovered how rapid forms automation can make anyone in the organization's lives easier, at the same time for that HR agent, right, for that fulfiller, providing visibility throughout that process. So DC, now I can turn it back over to you to see what questions we have.
Perfect. Before we get going, let's just take a quick minute. If you can go get into the search.
Sure, I'll pull that up.
First of all, the first question is what version of SharePoint are you working with to make this work?
So I am currently working with SharePoint Online, but it functions the exact same for on-prem. But for me specifically, I am working in the SharePoint Online tenant.
And then what versions of SharePoint are you able to interact with?
Sure. So all the on-prem back to 2013. So that's 2013, 2016, and SharePoint on-prem 2019. And then, of course, online.
Perfect. So now that we've got the search up, if we can just talk a little bit about how the search is working, the difference between the workflow data fabric and the SharePoint Online spoke, and how that's operating compared to what we're doing with search here.
Sure. So just to, take a step back, we've been focusing all or mostly on the back end of ServiceNow, so project managers, HR, and CSM agents. This is an end user, right? 95% of the business that comes into, in this case, Employee Center Pro Portal, could be any, standard SP service portal that ServiceNow offers. So you come in here for any, knowledge articles, right? FAQs, requests. My laptop isn't functioning properly. I got locked out of an account. So this is that central home base. But we're going to focus on the document portion, right? That's what we at DTech Apps specialize in. So personally, I've been at DTech for about a year and a half, and I get inundated with documents just being here a short time. For those that have been at organizations for 5, 10 plus years, there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, documents that you interact with. So with one simple search, we can query or we can look at anything and everything. So this is Outlook, right? Teams. That is only your Outlook and Teams based on your credentials. So you're not having visibility into someone else's. We have been asked that before, so there is no worry there. Policy documents. So this is the actual this is SharePoint, so these documents all live within SharePoint. If you do have access in SharePoint, you have access here. If you do not have access in SharePoint, you do not have access here. So we are always leveraging those permissions from SharePoint. We are not breaking that system. And also for those that are using knowledge bases, right, having knowledge articles, you can search all of that in one go. In terms of right, just additional capabilities, I don't have too many documents here, but if you do, you can filter based on any of that data that lives within or metadata that lives within SharePoint. To address the concern or the question about WDF. So for those that are not aware, WDF, Workflow Data Fabric, is something new to ServiceNow. And then there's something called ECC, or External Content Connector. So what that does is it looks at SharePoint. Well, today it's only SharePoint and Confluence. So it looks at, in this case, SharePoint Online, and it pulls that data. It crawls it, pulls the data from SharePoint, brings it into ServiceNow. So now you have two places where you're managing the data. And there's also a crawl time. So let's say we're working, it's 1 o'clock, and I add a document and I want someone else to collaborate on that document within SharePoint, but the crawl is every day at 9 a.m. They won't see that document until tomorrow. So it really depends on the crawl period. And then also you are searching and crawling that data back and have to manage it in two places. We can talk more about that, but that's the high level difference between what we do. And also you can do as many as you want in terms of searches, where ECC and WDF, they're based on, I think it's called credits. They're based on transactions and how many you're allowed to do before you have to pay more. So I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. So key differences, again, are we're not indexing anything. This is a user's own account. It's not an admin account, so the user only sees what the user sees. And then finally, just to wrap it up, what ServiceNow is doing is they charge per credit, and they also index. And we're not doing any of that with this, with what we're doing to search. And it's searching against multiple sources that have been configured. So you just have to configure the sources you want to search, and then that will determine the results. And you don't have to be a developer to set that up, right, Dave?
Correct. Yep, I was able to do that. Correct.
Perfect.
One thing to also mention, because there's been a lot of different terms, right? Doc integrator, doc flow. We also have the auto population called doc generator. Everything that you saw, as Brian mentioned at the top of the call, is all under the doc integrator suite. So everything, it's just all different capabilities, but under one suite.
Okay. I've got a question regarding what are the requirements to run this?
Sure. Is that in terms of licenses?
I would assume so, or the installation into the ServiceNow instance
Sure.
versus having to sit on its own server.
Yes. So Doc Integrator, the suite, is licensed per user, where when we're talking about forms, you can have 1, 10, 100, 1,000 forms at no additional cost. And then in terms of applications, you can plug and play in one app or 10 plus. So that's all at no additional cost as well, because it is per user. In terms of installation, we are a certified app on the ServiceNow store, which means we go through, I think Brian talked about this, we go through rigorous testing to be able to get that credential. So it's an installation on the store, just like downloading anything, an ITSM. It's like downloading Doc Integrator.
And I think, David, the point for the group here is that as long as you own ServiceNow, which I'm sure all of you do, there's nothing else you have to buy on the ServiceNow side of the house. There's no App Engine licenses. You just license Doc Integrator. And again, as long as that footprint is in your organization, you can put Doc Integrator into that environment.
Yep, great call out.
Perfect. Looks like a question right now.
Yep,
How does Doc Integrator use SharePoint library metadata? Does it pull in custom columns on a SharePoint library?
Sure. So we map via metadata. We are not storing it in ServiceNow. So like one example is, let's say you're within a CSM case and you have the case ID, CS, etc. You can map that into SharePoint into a field, a column, to associate the two, and that's the connection. But you're not bringing in data into ServiceNow. It is all residing in SharePoint. You're just connecting the metadata.
There may be something to talk about here just in general with what we can do with metadata. And I don't know about pulling it up as a sample, but we have, we can, if need be, you can, if the permissions are there, someone can bulk edit metadata from ServiceNow. They don't have to go back into SharePoint to update or change that information on the file that's being referenced. So. I don't know if you want to expand on that anymore, Dave.
Sure. And of course, based on permissions, so you cannot change something in ServiceNow's UI that you cannot change in SharePoint. So yes, exactly to David DC's point, but only things that you actually have permissions, because we are inheriting that from SharePoint.
Perfect. And let's see here. As more questions come through. We talked about SharePoint Online and all the versions. Let's see. I'll let you wrap up with any last thoughts or things you want to highlight there, Brian, before we hit the conclusion.
I think just to call out to everyone, the one common use case we always hear when we're talking to folks at different agencies and different companies is, using Doc Integrator, you do not have to go search for that document in SharePoint, find the right version, download the document to your desktop, put out, bring out your digital signature software, sign it, and then upload it back into SharePoint. And that is something that even something as simple as that is just a huge time saver. And I think it needs to just be called out one more time. So nothing is going to touch your desktop. You can automate hundreds, if not thousands, of standard forms. We have people that we speak to that can take, anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to automate a standard form. You can do it very quickly, and you don't need to be a developer in this case. So lots of different areas that I think that we can help.
Perfect.
That's it.
And then Real quickly, just a question on licensing. How much does this cost?
Licensing is a per user basis. So depending on whether you are, a commercial company, whether you're a government entity, we would be happy to discuss that. It is a fraction of the cost of what a ServiceNow license would be. And the reason we did it that way is we want everyone to be able to afford it and be able to deploy it across the enterprise. So this is a very economical solution that can be used and should be used by everybody. So happy to get into that in more detail. Please reach out to my email on the screen, or you can call me on my mobile.
With that, that concludes today's presentation. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, David, for your presentation. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining.